Having made my lathe stand, I wanted to set up my water wheel right next to it. I wanted the water wheel right next to the lathe because when you're working on a big project, you're constantly sharpening your chisels. And I was going to build a table to put the water wheel on, and I happened to find a nice roadside pickup. I was always inspired by Matthias Wandel. It seems like he's always finding great pieces of furniture on the roadside. I also have a brother-in-law who lives near Ithaca, New York. He's always finding these great things that people put to the curb. Well, right here in my tiny village of 400 residents, someone put this this chest of drawers up. It was actually 2 drawers taller than it is right now. I had to cut it down to size so that the wheel is the correct height. And I got myself a little chest without having to build anything. What we're working on today is this jig that I made to sharpen my small gouges with. I have the jet water wheel. This is essentially the same as the Tormek water wheel, and you have a whole bunch of jigs that you can buy from them to sharpen chisels or knives or scissors or axes. And each thing that you buy is fairly expensive. So there are gouge sharpening jigs available from Jet or Tormek, but I just didn't feel like paying for it. So I felt like I could, I know enough about geometry to make my own. So the way this jig works is that this hole slides onto the crossbar of the water wheel, and you fit your small gouge into this this channel here. I did that with a drill, and then I just cut the piece of wood away to give us a semicircular channel. And you put your gouge in there and you tighten it with these 2 screws. I have 3 small gouges that fit in this jig. And the way that it works is that it can teeter this way around the crossbar, and it can turn this way to give you the rounded point that these gouges need to have. So it's not adjustable. It's this angle is fixed. And to be honest, I eyeballed this angle and just figured every time I sharpen it from here on, that's the angle I'd give them, and it seemed to work. You know, that's the shape that I want the point to be. But you need to have that as opposed to have it resting the tool on the crossbar and sharpening it like that. Otherwise this would be perfectly flat all the way across. So our jig doesn't have too many parts. It has the mount that goes on the crossbar of the water wheel. This mount has a pivot for the top of the jig. It's rounded around the center, and it has this part that holds the tool. This forms a hinge like that, which has a nail for the middle of it. I have a couple of washers that make it so it won't jiggle. They go on either side of our mount. A little hard to get on, so I won't do it on camera. And I actually made this angle separate from this hinge just because it was easier. And then there's just a small piece of plywood that screws on top to hold the tool in place. So when you first put the tool onto the wheel, you want this surface to be perfectly flat on the surface of the stone, and it won't be. And the way you get it flat is to raise your bar until it's flat all the way across. It's going to be a little hard for you to see on this video, but you just keep raising that bar until you see it makes contact all the way across the stone. So we mount the jig in our water wheel, and you can see you can move it side to side and it pivots like that. So while you're sharpening, you're kind of sweeping it across the face of the stone like that. I'm not going to do it because this is already sharp, but this is how the jig works. It gives you a nice uniform edge. I used to do this by eyeballing it, and some people are probably good enough to do so. I'm not. So this jig does what I need it to do.